Welcome to DataCast Solutions, Introduction to KNIME for the Data Analyst. This is not going to be a long chapter, but it's going to be covering something important called workflow abstraction. This is our ability to call other workflows from your workflow. And that's just something that's part of typical application development, is to be able to call other objects. And KNIME certainly has that capability built in. Let's take a look back at our original example here of sample 6. I've got a file reader and it's simply reading a file. Now this could do anything I want. It could do all kinds of data manipulation with it behind the scenes. But let's assume for a moment I wanted to make this workflow something that I could call from another workflow. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is allow this to receive container input and output. So for container input, do I want to input a row of data at a time, or do I want to input an entire table, or do I just want to input variables? Because basically all I need right now is to bring variables into it. I want to bring in the name, and I'm going to call it my file. And say that's all I want to do is bring my file as a variable into this workflow from whoever calls it. And as a consequence of what comes out, I'm going to put an output container and say I want you to send back all of the data. So I can just do a test. I've got a sample file set up in here as a demonstrated reader, and I'm just going to say, you know, my file out is the data that it's sending back. Okay. Now this becomes now something I can call and execute and return data back. So now I want to write a module to actually invoke this. So I'm going to come in here now to sample 7, and let's go ahead and put together an expression, a variable expression. And I want to create a variable called my file. And there is the file name. I've got a file that I can point to and say, I want you to read that file for me. And now I can execute a call. Now KNIME allows me to do this in two ways. I can call one row at a time. So in other words, let's say you've got a table with 7,000 rows. You can call that subroutine 7,000 times, once for each row, passing it each row individually. Or instead, you could choose to say, I'm going to pass you the entire table and let you just work on the table as a group. Or I can call a workflow on a server, someplace at a different location. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and just call pass. Since I don't have any data to pass, I'm just going to connect the variable ports here. And you see this is optional. It's not filled in, so I don't have any data. So I'm going to double click here, and KNIME is going to pull up a list of all of the, I can manually type the workflow in, or I can just browse down to it and say the workflow I want to actually execute by scrolling down to it. And it is my, so basically it's identified everything within my system that I could work on. I'm going to go ahead and go at sample 6, which is the workflow that I want to call. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now when I call this the first time through, okay, I'm going to execute this node. And when I execute this node, if I go to workflow 6, you'll see it's working, but it's workflow 6 right now, it's hard-coded. It's reading a singular file. I want to reset this and change workflow 6 to say, I want you not to read the table, I want you to use the variable that was passed to me, my file. That's the file I want to use. I could have also, of course, done that in the flow variable section, but some of the screens in KNIME give that where passing a variable is common. They give you the button to put the flow variable directly in there. So now I can reset this and say this is now all set to go. And I'll go ahead and save node 6. And now I'll reset node 7. And I'll execute the call again. This time it's bringing me back the country reference master that I asked it to. So I can basically build up workflows that call other workflows just by adding that call option. That concludes this chapter of the class. Feel free to move on to the next section.